Hi everyone, and welcome back to my Millfield story with Advait Patodia. I hope you all are having a great day. Now, here at Millfield, we're very fortunate to have a wonderful network of old Millfieldians who have done some incredible things with their lives. Some of these OMs have gone on to highly respected universities, some into journalism, some have even run multi-million-dollar businesses, and a select few have even gone on to politics. Today we have with us someone who's done all of these three and more. Mr. Roland Rudd has not only gone to Oxford University, a former president of the Oxford Union as well. He's also gone into journalism, founded Finsbury, and is also a very well-known politician. But despite all these achievements, he still has not forgotten his roots from Millfield, as he is also the chair of governors at Millfield. Mr. Roland Rudd, thank you so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate your time. We know you're a very busy man.
Thank you so much, Evan. It's a real privilege to be here.
All right, then let's just get into the first question. In this crazy world we live in with so much news and negativity and constant change, how are you doing?
Well, it's been quite an interesting year. I suppose, in one sense, you obviously miss the actual meetings, when you're actually present, and it's harder to do certain things if you're not doing them in front of somebody. But on the other hand, I think this has also shown that there are a lot of things we used to do in terms of meetings that you can do better on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever it is. So I sort of think, if you're on a board, all the subcommittee meetings can all be done online. And there's a huge amount that can be done online. And so I think it will have some behavioral changes, which are for the good. But ultimately, there are key things that you've got to do face to face. And so we'll come back to that. But I'm also sort of optimist. I think, although the government has been very slow to deal with the severity of the crisis, they're finally getting to grips with it. And obviously, we've had 3 vaccines, which is amazing. And we've worked with 2 of the 3. And I'm really excited about that.
So let's roll back the years and take you back to your Millfield days as a student, of course. What were you like as a student at Millfield, and tell us a bit about your life at Millfield back then?
Well, yes, it's quite a long time ago, but it feels like it was only the other day in many ways. I hugely enjoyed it. I think Millfield gave me an amazing opportunity because I'm dyslexic, and I was able to move up in terms of classes and positions in terms of where I was, basically on the back of wanting to be moved up, not necessarily being justified, but Millfield would accommodate that because they could see that I was working hard and I was determined. And I am a sort of believer that ultimately hard work does pay off, and that if today when I look at my company, and that if you said to me, I can give you 10 brilliantly gifted people, or I can give you 10 extraordinarily hardworking people, and you can choose, I'll take the hardworking. So I am a great believer in that. I don't think, I also think there's a sort of myth of the so-called self-made man. I don't think there's such a thing, because we all need the help that we can get in an environment. And I think for me, Millfield was incredibly helpful in both bolstering my confidence in being able to do what I wanted to do. I wasn't a great sports person, so I ended up doing running, and I really enjoyed that. And I ended up doing debating. I mean, my first debate I did in a house debate, I was terrible. And my housemaster, Tim Taylor, took me aside and said, look, I think you can do so much better. And then I really went for it and enjoyed it. And I loved the plays. I used to act, and the house play rivalry was really good fun. And so I really enjoyed that. And I was always very much against smoking. Most of my friends smoked. Most people at Millfield in the 70s smoked. I was always against smoking, not against drinking, although of course it mustn't be done when you're not allowed to do it, only in moderation. But that would be a slight vice I had, but while being vehemently against tobacco.
What house were you in?
I was at Homecroft.
Homecroft, my brother's house.
Fantastic.
So, like you said, like I mentioned, you're still very invested in Millfield. You're the chair of governors at Millfield today. So, what do you think the transition has been, like you said, from the 70s to 2020 now at Millfield?
Well, it's a really interesting question. I think it's very important when you've been at the school and you've had this wonderful time at the school, also not to go back to your own memories and say, this is what Millfield's about, because schools have to change and develop. And ultimately, great schools are led by great people. And you can have a great brand, and it's like this in business, Advert. You can have a great brand, but if you get a wrong CEO, the company will fall down significantly. There was I give you an example. Britain used to have this phenomenal engineering company called GEC. It was one of the biggest companies in the whole country. And it was led one time by a man who decided that the future was not in heavy manufacturing, but was in pursuing some dream on the internet. And it didn't matter if you didn't make a profit. And basically the company disappeared. So it is all about leadership. And, I obviously genuinely believe Gavin Horgan is a great headmaster. I was able to pick him with my fellow governors. And I think it was a good time for the school to have new leadership. And I think it came at the right time. And I think there's a slightly different culture at the school. So you mustn't forget that Millfield is a great sporting school, and that's incredibly important. So you mustn't sort of rest on your laurels and say Millfield will always be a great sporting school. You have to work at that. I think it's really important that we continue to attract people who have learning difficulties, but obviously I'm particularly keen on that dyslexic kids will come to Millfield and leave stronger than ever. But I'm also very keen that Millfield ensures that every pupil that comes to the school leaves with a better grade than they arrived with in terms of in terms of where they are academically. And I think that's very important, and it matters hugely to the headmaster. I think also maybe the culture's slightly changing, and I think that's good. I think it has to be more inclusive. I think we've always had this amazing diversity at Millfield. So it was diverse in the 70s, which was really unusual. And it was a sort of forerunner of how the country was developing. And I think that was a wonderful thing. So I think we're now more proud of our diversity. And I think that's a really good thing. I think as the head boy, Jamie, did a really good thing on white privilege, which I thought was beautifully pitched. And I really very thoughtful, which is very important for us all. I think the fact that we're co-ed, and we've been co-ed from the beginning, is something very important. And I think it's very important that people can be who they are at Millfield, and that we celebrate that, and we have a sort of absolutely zero tolerance for any form of bullying, particularly any form of bullying against people who are different. And I think that's really important. And so perhaps you could say Millfield sometimes had a bit of a laddish culture. And, you could see that perhaps in some of the excesses that in the past the rugby team may have got up to. And I'm not saying, I'm not trying to be prudish in the sense you can't have a good time and you can't have fun together as guys. And of course you can. And that's part and parcel of life. But I think Millfield has a greater awareness of its diversity and of enveloping and supporting people who are different. And I think that's brilliant.
So let's get back to you after you left Millfield as a student. So obviously you went to Oxford. My question is, take us through what made you choose to go there, and what exactly did you study while you were there?
I think I really wanted to go there because I felt that it was a sort of affirmation that I had succeeded in a small way on the academic stage, which I'd always found incredibly difficult. So, I don't kid myself. I'm not an academic, and that wasn't what I was trying to be. But I was trying to, for myself, I wanted to be able to say, look, I can compete with the best. And so that was important to me. I also really, because I'd really loved debating and was fascinated and am fascinated in politics, the Oxford Union was really important to me. So that's one of the big things that attracted me to it. And I spent a lot of time there and finally got voted in as president of the Oxford Union on the third time. And that was definitely a goal that I wanted to do. Well, but also, it was just a wonderful time. It was in the early 80s, and there were wonderful times when you go punting, which was really fun along the river. And people would have picnics in the summer and lovely, there would be wonderful parties in the colleges. So it was a really nice mix. And also you met really interesting people from different walks of life.
So speaking about the Oxford Union, like I was telling you off camera, the entire concept for my Millfield story came up from the Oxford Union. So over the summer, I was actually watching an interview of an American Indian actor called Kunal Nair. And the second I saw that, I thought that Millfield must have a version of this. So thank you very much. In a way, I think the Oxford Union has inspired me so much, and the fact that you were the president of the Oxford Union means that you've actually had a lot to do with my Millfield story as well, even before it ending. So building on that, sorry, you said that you got voted in on the third attempt. What made you keep going for it?
Well, that is an interesting question. I think it's important in life not to get too hung up about rejection. And I think most of us, if we're really honest, the thing that holds us back is the fear of rejection. Okay. And it's not a nice thing, right? I'm very lucky that I generally have a very optimistic and happy disposition. And I have friends and some members of family who have suffered from depression, but it's not something that afflicts me. So I know I'm very lucky like that because it afflicts many, many people. But when I can remember losing the presidency of the Oxford Union the first time round. I was definitely depressed for about a week. And I used to wake up in the morning and think, what's wrong? And then I'd remember it and it would be weighed on me. But you have to keep going. And the second time, I actually lost by a bigger number. I sort of lost by 60 the first time, and I lost by about 120 the second. But I messed up the second time. And I knew I'd messed up because I hadn't prepared enough for a speech. And it was actually the Secretary of State of the United States at the time, Caspar Weinberger, was speaking, and I was speaking on his side. And anyway, it was unforgivable. It was also a lesson in life. Don't ever let anything go to chance. So that was another lesson I learned. And then the third time I stood again, I won by 6 votes. But the point is, people don't normally go for 3 times because it's like if you lose a third time, it's so humiliating. But I just decided it was worth the risk. And I think that's an important lesson in life. Don't get worried. It's not humiliating if you lose. It's better to try and fail and move on to something else than it is to never have tried.
I completely agree with that. So after you graduated from Oxford, you had a brief career in journalism before you went on to start what has been an incredible entrepreneurial journey. So could you just take us through that entrepreneurial journey and what motivated you to start off from scratch, basically?
Well, basically, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. When I was at Oxford, I thought I'd go into politics. But of course, being a sort of centrist, I joined the party called the Social Democratic Party that had split off from Labour, and it was run by Labour's former Home Secretary, Labour's former Foreign Secretary, people like Roy Jenkins and David Owen and Shirley Williams. They were amazing people, but it didn't work. If we'd had proportional representation, it would have worked, because funnily enough, in the 83 election, the SDP, along with the Liberals, got almost 26% of the vote, and they ended up with about 25 seats, and Labour got 28% of the vote and ended up with more than 200 seats. So it was that was the end of that. So I then decided, if I'm not going to go into politics, what am I going to do? And I really had no idea. And by chance, I went into journalism, which is an odd thing to do if you're dyslexic, because most journalists, I'd say actually all journalists, never make a spelling mistake. And I was now making about 10 spelling mistakes for every 1,000 words, which I thought was amazing. But I was getting caught out quite a lot, but it was fine, and I survived that. But when I was on the Financial Times, what I really enjoyed doing was, I liked breaking a story. I liked persuading somebody to tell me something that wasn't known, and I would reveal it. And that's what I really loved doing. And it taught me how to write clearly, succinctly, and in a sharp manner, and also taught me to organize in my mind what was the most important thing. So if you have 10 facts, you have to rearrange them in order of importance. But I didn't think I was going to be a journalist all my life. I wasn't going to end up as editor, because I wasn't a sort of beautiful writer in that sense. So I thought, what am I going to do? And I was writing about finance, and I saw the fact that a lot of companies had, at the time, about half the companies I was writing about had some form of communication help. And I didn't think it was done very well. And so I just thought, if I was going to do this myself, how would it be different? And I thought of a way of doing it differently. And then I set it up. And the tough thing about setting it up is, I left the FT on Friday, I set up on Monday, I had 3 clients, and I had a secretary, and that was it. And I remember the first day, the phone didn't ring. And I was always used to the phone ringing. You're on a news desk, there's very busyness going on, and there was nothing busy. And I did have a slight doubt that day. But then after that, it moved on, and I was able to attract good people to come and work with me. And then we were lucky. We rode a good economic cycle, and it developed. I managed to develop it into a global business.
In 2001, you sold Finsbury to WPP. Talk us through why you made that decision.
Well, it was really interesting. I really didn't go out to set up Finsbury to make money. I did it because I wanted to be sort of in charge of my own destiny, work for myself, and do something slightly different. And a byproduct of it was making money. By the way, I don't think there's anything wrong in people setting things up to make money at all. It's just that it wasn't driving me in the same way as it drove some people. But a byproduct was, at the time, Gordon Brown had changed the capital gains tax, so you only paid 10% tax. So it was a very attractive proposition. Having said that, you do give up something. You give up, part of your independence. And so what I was able to do was, I was able to reestablish an investment in the company. So I had shares in the company, so I feel a part owner. And then what's been really important is we developed the business in the United States, and this year, so when you first asked me about this year, actually it's been a very good year for us, because we basically did a merger with a very strong company in Germany, with a big public affairs company in Washington. And I've reset the relationship with WPP, who bought us, as a joint venture. So we're 50% owned by us and 50% by them. And that's a much better arrangement, because then everyone is an owner. And ultimately, that gives you a greater sense of having control over your own destiny and an incentive.
Mm-hmm. And you spoke about all these things that you do. Obviously, you're very involved with Millfield. You've got your own clients, and then you've got your business. How does being a business owner and being so involved in so many different things integrate with each other for you?
Well, I think it's incredibly important to use your time effectively. I would say most people waste about half their time, and they're doing things they don't have to do. They're spending too much time on trying to get things right. You know, my father, he was he had his own stockbroking company when I was a child, and he had a phrase where he used to say to analysts, "Get it written, don't get it right," because they'd always say, "Oh, I've got to get it right." So they'd spend all this time thinking about it, and it would be ages until they actually put it on paper. I think in life, you've got to get things done quickly. Don't spend hours agonizing about different emails. Just get them off quickly and deal with them immediately. And just, you've got to be very effective about use of your time. I'm also lucky, I've got a very good team. So I've got an amazing PA. I've got a chief of staff who organizes things. I've got a guy who really arranges everything for me in terms of both in terms of, you know, on my home front. So I've got a lot of support, which enables me to use my time perhaps more effectively than I would be able to otherwise.
Mm-hmm. So let's drift a little bit from business and dive into politics. What really got you into politics? You said that you've always loved debate. Was that it?
I think I love debate. I think I've always had, my views haven't really changed. I've always been quite centrist. So I suppose I've had a sense of, I think you need to have a good financial bedrock. So the country needs to be strong financially. And I think the element that, if you look back on Margaret Thatcher, her sort of 11 and a half extraordinary years, where she was right was, you can't just continually spend your way out of problems. Although that does seem to be the Conservative approach today. It's quite interesting. But ultimately, you've got the Chancellor telling us, haven't you, we can't do that forever, right? And he made that joke about wanting to take away Boris Johnson's credit card. But underneath the joke was a serious point that he's saying, look, PM, you can't keep spending. So I think that was something, I do feel that. And I think you do need a pro-business agenda to encourage businesses to thrive. But at the same time, I feel very strongly that you do need to redistribute some of that money into social programs that help those who are worse off, who are underprivileged. I think we have a very important duty to ensure that we don't have people living in poverty, that the minimum wage continues to increase, and that we do our utmost to ensure that we have a society where people do genuinely feel that everyone's in this together. And on that bit, I think Margaret Thatcher was wrong. And it's very interesting. If you look at that, there was a brutal miners' strike in 1985, and she was correct in that we could not continue to keep all of these coal mines open, but she was wrong in seeing these people as the enemy and not doing anything for the communities when the miners' strike collapsed. And you can see that nearly all those areas where there were, in Yorkshire, in Nottinghamshire, Nottinghamshire, of course, a lot of the miners continued to work. But in those areas, they all voted for Brexit. And I think it's no coincidence, because you had people who were alienated, and it may come 3 decades later, but people who are alienated from society and who don't feel they've got a stake, whether you think it's right or wrong to leave the EU, the fact is, if you're asked a question by the government, you're going to say no, whatever that question is, if you're alienated. So I think it showed that we hadn't done enough in terms of helping those communities.
Mm-hmm. So what are your future ambitions in politics? I mean, I want to build on what you said about Brexit and explore that a bit more with you, because obviously you were heavily publicized for your take and that entire period. But before that, what are your future ambitions?
I mean, I've always been a passionate pro-European. I believe very strongly that Britain has been better off in the EU, fighting our case, our corner. And, I could point to you many things that are great about the EU, from the single market, which is a British creation. We pulled in those countries from the Eastern Europe, which was a British creation. And the fact that the EU has become much more of a dynamic bloc, I think, was all helped by Britain. So I'm obviously very sorry we're leaving, but, I lost that. I was treasurer of the Remain camp. We lost that battle. Then I was chair of the People's Vote. I wanted to get another vote, and we lost that. Both times we came very, very close to winning. But you have to accept eventually when you lose, particularly at the last general election, and then you've just got to move on. I suspect we'll see what happens. But, it was really interesting. The governor of the Bank of England actually contradicted the Chancellor when he said the worst economic problem that we face is not the coronavirus, but is leaving the EU without a deal. I think we will leave with a deal, but I think it's going to be challenging. I mean, I'd love to be proven wrong. I only want the best for my country. And so we'll just have to see.
Mm-hmm. Just out of curiosity, what's your take on the US elections?
Well, I actually think Biden was the only Democratic candidate who was capable of defeating Donald Trump. And so I think it was incredibly fortunate that he won the nomination. It wasn't a close election. You can't say, winning by more than 6 million votes is close. He got the same number of electoral college votes as Trump did, but as I say, significantly more in terms of popular vote. I think the extraordinary thing about the US is, it's very important here to distinguish two things. So, more people voted for Trump than any losing candidate for president ever. And it's important not to denigrate those voters. It's important to understand why they voted for him. And he did have a lot of people who felt left behind still. And that requires a lot of thought and a lot of change in terms of how you go about policy. But on the other side of the coin, he did something that was truly appalling. He had planned all along to try to steal this election in the event of him losing. And he did it by the book, the way that he had written it. So first of all, he denigrated the whole idea of mail-in ballots. Then he tried to get states to stop the count when he had won. He'd count on the day before the mail-in ballots came. And then he basically used his social media outlet, which I fear on the whole has been a force for bad rather than good. And I also think Facebook is one of the worst companies, I'm afraid, that we have to deal with today. And he used that alongside his enablers, who are weak people who go along with the bully, to question the election. And the problem is, you are now going to have a transition. But, about 40% of Americans think that election was fraudulent and stolen. And that's a massive problem going forward. And so he has been, I think, the worst president of the United States until Andrew Jackson, who was the vice president to Lincoln, who was a racist Democrat and did appalling things in terms of not stopping the white Americans in the South commit the most appalling racist acts after the Civil War had been won. But after him, Trump is the worst, and it's going to require all the skills available that Biden's team and his advisors have to get through this problem.
So speaking of the transition from Biden to Trump, let's transition into your life that you're on the other spectrum of now. From a student, you're now the head of the faculty at Millfield. What's that transition been like for you? I mean, what do you think about the culture at Millfield? You spoke about the culture back in the 70s and the 80s, and you said that we've become a lot more inclusive and a lot more proud of our diversity. I can say that I'm Indian, of course, and I'm one of 70 different nationalities here, and I'm very proud of that. So what do you think Millfield will do going forward in your position today?
Well, I really do think it has a unique position, because I think it's a great brand. I think that we can be proud of the fact that it must be the most diverse independent school, co-ed school in the country, and certainly one of the most diverse schools anywhere. I think that it's incredibly important that we continue to be not to put up academic barriers to coming in and saying a threshold, because I think the beauty of Millfield is that we've always tried to be, we've welcomed everybody, but at the same time to be very disciplined about what we want to achieve and ensuring that everyone works to their ability in terms of improving themselves. And you can do the two go hand in hand. I think you can both improve yourself and really enjoy yourself at the same time. But if you mustn't. The key thing is not to waste time because it's precious, and these are formative years, and it makes a huge difference in terms of what you're able to do next. And I think the other thing is to try to, a sense of caring for other people, feeling an obligation and a duty to help those who aren't as fortunate as oneself, and a recognition that actually you do things best when you do things with other people. So you want this twin track approach of working as hard as you can to improve yourself, but at the same time caring for others and being kind to other people, because I think that's also a really important thing. I mean, I think today, one of the troubles with social media is it encourages a sort of rudeness and a nastiness that most people would never reveal in the past. And now it's easy to reveal because it's like, that you can't be seen, but you can actually, do this online. And I think it's important for us to remember how important it is to care for others and be kind. And I think that is, if you act on that basis, I think you have a much more fruitful life, a much more thoroughly important life, which means more to you, take into consideration others. So I think that's another really important feature of the school.
Mm-hmm. So talking about being kind and caring for others, we've spoken about so many things today, but now I want to talk about something that's very important to all the students here at Millfield, and of course the staff here at Millfield as well. And that is Together Band and all the other charities that we are affiliated with. Today, sitting here, I am an ambassador for peace and strong institutions for Together Band. Together Band is a global movement that aims to raise awareness for the United Nations 17 goals through creativity and culture. And today, sitting here again, I am also part of my house, Walton House's initiative to help raise awareness for testicular cancer by growing out all our moustaches all of November, also called Movember. So could you talk to us a little bit about the charities that you are affiliated with and how you think all of us at Millfield and all of us watching can help be a part of that?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is well done on what you're doing and your colleagues are doing, because both of those charities are incredibly important. And I think the great thing about charities is actually, well, there are three things, about charities. One is you raise awareness about the issue you're dealing with, right? And as you said about, growing out moustaches, for November on testicle cancer is incredibly important, because you're reminding people that there is this problem, and sometimes people can find it very awkward to talk about it. So I think awareness is incredibly important. I think the second thing is being involved gives one huge satisfaction, a sense of meaning in life, that you're actually doing something that is really good and helpful. And the third thing, obviously, is raising the funds to allow these charities to prosper. I've been involved. I'm an ambassador for the Alzheimer's Society. It's something that is very close to my heart. My mother-in-law died of it. My father, at the end of his life, had Alzheimer's, and it's something that a lot of people think is you just get it when you're old, and there's nothing you can do about it. Well, there are things you can do about it, and actually, fun enough, physical exercise is probably the most important thing to deal with it. But it's also really important. Is how to treat people who've got it, how to understand their disposition, and how to make them feel at ease. So that's really important. I'm also an ambassador for Made by Dyslexia, which is a great thing by a fellow governor, Kate Griggs, who set that up, and making dyslexia much more aware and helping schools, particularly in the state sector, who aren't able to deal with it. So that's been very important to me. And then I've been a member of Amnesty International all my life, because I think it's a wonderful thing, highlighting where torture and repression takes place around the world.
Mm-hmm. I love the charitable culture that we have at Millfield, like we've spoken about. What do you think other schools and, like I said, the rest of us could do to help bring that into a time when there's so much needed? With COVID-19, there's so much going on. There's so many people who aren't in the privileged position that we are in. So how can we help them right now?
Well, I think it is so important to get involved, because it doesn't take very much to make a huge difference. And I think that's both in terms of making people aware of things and aware of these, but just getting involved. And it encourages other people to get involved. And if you encourage others to get involved, it has this wonderful knock-on beneficial effect. And I think it is, as I was saying earlier, it's such a great thing for the soul. You feel you're really making a difference, and to be able to do that for the giver, in terms of their time and money and raising awareness, it's a wonderful feeling. And I think so I would encourage everybody to get involved. And I think it's good, as you're saying, to make a couple of charities your thing. You don't want to spread yourself too widely. I find it very difficult. I get lots of friends who get in touch with me. They're running a marathon, they're going on a bike, they're going up a mountain, they're going up, Kilimanjaro. I always support them in terms of, because I think their endeavors are wonderful. But I also think it's great to focus on a couple and try and make a difference with those.
Mr. Rudd, we've taken so much of your time already. So I'd like to ask you one last question on behalf of all of us here. If you had to go back and if you had to give any advice to any of us that you'd like to leave us with, what would that be?
Well, it's very sweet of you to ask. By the way, I've really enjoyed it. I just think, it's a wonderful time in your life when you're young and you're starting out. And I wouldn't get too worried about having to have a plan. I think quite often you have to take advantage of opportunities as they come your way. So every now and then I come across people who've had these amazing, plans over 3 decades. But on the whole, I wouldn't bother with those. I would just make life very simple and just say, look, I'm going to really work hard at what I want to do, at where I really feel I can make a difference, and believe in yourself that ultimately you can achieve great things if you will them, if you actually work towards them, and recognize that you will do better if you're in collaboration with others. And then you have a great opportunity ahead. And it is, a lot of people look back and they say to themselves, some of my happiest moments have been at school and university. And so it is a wonderful time, and I'm sure that you won't be wasting any of it.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Rudd, for your time. All of us at Millfield and all of us watching are so appreciative of all the wise words you've given us today. And it's so much to think about. And I'm very sure that all of us will definitely introspect and make certain changes in our lives. And just every day, nothing else. And yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Rudd. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much indeed.